Welcome back everybody, I'm Sega Lord X, and in this episode we are going to talk about Sega Saturn console exclusives. Now the 8 games that I'm about to show you are games that pretty much you can't play anywhere else. Even today these games are pretty much locked to the Saturn. So we're going to take a look at 8 games like I said. Let's get started. In early 1997, Nippon Computer Systems would release Assault Suit Leynos 2 for the Sega Saturn. This tactical run-and-gun is a sequel to the Mega Drive classic of the same namesake, and known as Target Earth on the Sega Genesis. Load up your mech, choose your weapons, and jump straight into this 2D masterwork of a game. Screen-filling bosses and relentless enemies will stalk you constantly, forcing you to stay moving every second of the stage. Stand still too long and you're toast. That's right, Assault Suit Leynos 2 is a hard game in the beginning, and you do well to find a walkthrough or FAQ to help you understand the fundamentals. Once you do, this adrenaline-filled rush of a game is sure to please. Later stages force strategic loadouts to cope with the nearly overwhelming enemy presence, but that just gives the game incredible replay value and longevity. The lone weakness of this game is the constant chat box interruptions of your team, which of course are all in Japanese, and serve as little more than irritations to those of us who do not speak the language. Outside of that, this game is a great addition to your Saturn library, and a game definitely worth its current asking price of around $35. Astal. This one needs little introduction, but I'll do one anyway. Released by Sega shortly after the Japanese launch in April of 1995, this gorgeous side-scrolling platformer was undeniable confirmation that the Sega Saturn was an absolute 2D powerhouse. Huge, detailed sprites filled a screen full of color and loaded to the brim with scaling and rotation effects. Transparencies would show up too, squashing the scuttlebutt that the Saturn couldn't do them at all. Astal was a tour de force of artistic expression visually to be sure, but it also had one of the most engrossing and powerful soundtracks of the time as well. Every stage was accompanied by perfect arrangements for the mood of the environment, and each one is worthy of ripping to your MP3 collection. The opening theme song, titled Let Me Try Again, is one of the best songs of the 32-bit generation, introducing a new character. It was a perfect anthem of a downtrodden hero trying to right the wrongs upon the world. Gameplay consisted of tried-and-true platforming and melee attacks, fleshed out with great companion powers to boot. Astal didn't have flashy magic or weapons. Astal waded into battle like a real man and beat the hell out of everything with his fists, even the bosses. If I had to list weaknesses, I'd point out the rather short stages and poor Western ports of this game. Outside of that, the Japanese release of Astal is the way to own this overlooked gem of the 1990s. Its mood, atmosphere, art design, and musical composition all scream Sega quality. If you don't own this game and you have a Saturn, consider this your calling out. No Saturn owner should be without Astal. Published on the Saturn in mid-1997 by Hudson Soft, Bulk Slash is a rare third-person shooter for the machine. You take control of a mech tasked with various objectives in cities and enemy bases. Fight on the ground with ballistic weapons and melee attacks, or transform and take to the skies, unloading blasters and missiles onto your targeted foes. This simple and effective gameplay hook makes Bulk Slash a fun game that's extremely easy to get into. Graphics use a mix of VDP2 powered groundwork and polygon architecture to build a solid looking 3D playfield that has a great frame rate. Draw-in distance is relatively short, and the dreaded mesh transparencies are the game's only visual blemishes. I greatly enjoyed the soundtrack to this one as well, as it has that 90s anime feel to it. Bulk Slash typically sells for around $70 complete, so be sure to try this out before you drop the mad bills. I really enjoyed this game though, and think it's worth owning if you're a big fan of the genre. First released in Europe in late 1996 by Eidos Interactive, CrimeWave would be one of the few car combat games on the Sega Saturn. Sporting an overhead isometric perspective, CrimeWave tasks you as a bounty hunter to run down various targets and rid the world of their scum and villainy. Collect money and move on to different areas of the city, facing tougher bounties as you go. CrimeWave really could have been a damn good Saturn game. It has a fun and easy to get into premise, and when everything is going like it should, it looks good and runs great. What's the problem then, you ask? The main issue is that the engine is constantly hitching and lurching as you play. I do not know if it's because of the constant loading or what, but it can be infuriating at its worst. This impacts playability incredibly and is a constant distraction. It doesn't break the game, and you can still enjoy this one in short bursts, but the game could have been a lot more enjoyable had these issues with the engine been ironed out before release. This one is another fairly cheap game for the Saturn, so if you're in the mood for some car combat, it may be enough to scratch that itch. In early 1997, Sega would port the Titan arcade release Funky Head Boxers to the Sega Saturn. This weird boxing game would present fighters with huge square heads so you could see the punishment they would take during each and every punch. This unique presentation is instantly destroyed, however, thanks to the horrible mesh transparency that envelops your boxer's head as soon as the game starts. It's insanely ugly and robs the game of the one area it would have been different in. Gameplay doesn't help you overlook this, as it's ploddingly slow and it's really tough to learn effective tactics, especially with the CPU constantly dishing out special moves that reap heavy damage if landed. It isn't a terrible game for what it is, but why Sega didn't continue its awesome Evander Holyfield line of boxing games on the Sega Saturn is a mystery when stuff like this received resources in its place. Why replace a near perfect boxing franchise with this game when the system clearly lacked the hardware to display it properly? The Mansion of Hidden Souls was released shortly after the Japanese launch of the Saturn and published by Sega in late 1994. It would be a complete overhaul of the game Mansion of Hidden Souls for the Sega CD, with improved FMV sequences and deeply altered story elements and musical score. If you've ever played games like D or Seventh Guest, you'll know what to expect here. You'll move about and explore environments via pre-rendered FMV sequences, solving simple puzzles and talking with various characters. Paths are predetermined and most puzzle elements are really hard to miss, leading to the game sort of playing itself, allowing you to really only control the flow and pacing. Unfortunately, the strengths of the original Sega CD release were lost here, as both the voice acting, complete with disembodied heads, and musical score are severely lacking. Where the atmosphere was dark and foreboding on the Sega CD, everything is bright and overly childish in the Saturn version. There is no tension to speak of, just simply walking around and looking at things to interact with. On the plus side, the game is cheap in both the US and Japan, so giving it a chance isn't a big deal. I take the Sega CD original over this one though, as it was a far better told and sounding game. In early 1997, Time Warner Interactive would give the Saturn one of its rarest and strikingly unique playing games, Shinrei Jusatsushi Taromaru, or Psychic Assassin Taromaru, or even Psychic Killer Taromaru. This strange 2.5D quasi-side-scrolling action game features 2D sprites against polygonal backdrops. This presentation looks good on the Saturn, allowing the machine to flex some of its 2D muscle while still providing a 3D element that was popular at the time. Gameplay revolved around allowing an auto-targeting crosshair to lock onto enemies so you could attack. This mechanic took time to adjust to, but worked well once you understood how and when you should attack. The musical score reflects the ancient Japanese setting with dramatic beats and spooky elements interspersed throughout. This is a genre where I feel the Saturn was grossly underutilized. 2.5D style games could have flourished on the Saturn in my opinion, allowing the machine to flood the screen with beautiful 2D artwork while retaining the polygons that gamers were crazy for then. Alas, at only about 7,500 copies printed, Psychic Killer Taromaru is incredibly rare. Commanding eBay prices at $400 and up, it's priced well above its worth. Again, if you have access to playing backups, give this game a try. It showed a glimpse at what perhaps Sega should have focused on for the machine, especially for its speedy blue mascot. Stellar Assault SS was released in early 1998 by Sims and is the sequel to the 32X game Stellar Assault, also called Shadow Squadron. This version of the game is light years better than the 32X original in just about every single way. The gameplay is much faster, with far easier targeting of enemy ships. Textured map polygons highlight a much improved graphics presentation as well. This version of the game is also story heavy, with tons of interactions between the pilots before, during, and after the missions. There are not a lot of flight sim style games on the Saturn that are really worth a damn, but this one actually plays and looks pretty good. The only thing that holds me back from a full-on recommendation is the absurdly high eBay values this thing has. It often sells for $200 complete, and despite it being a cool game, it's worth nowhere near this. The game isn't really all that rare, so I have no clue why this one costs what it does. If you have the ability to play backups, or you aren't opposed to emulation, give the game a look and decide if that $200 price tag is worth it to you. So there we go, folks. 8 console exclusive games for the Sega Saturn. Now some of those games are actually pretty good, and some of those games are not terribly expensive. I definitely think you should take a look at them. Now, I'm already looking at more games to add for a part 2 to this particular episode. So if you guys have any recommendations, throw them down in the comments section and let me know what I should cover next. Also, I am on Twitter. I have been trying to use it more. I want you guys to add me at SegaLordX. Hit me up with questions. Hit me up with just saying hello. Pay attention to some of the crap that I post. I try to let people know on Twitter what I am going to do next. So that's a good way to find out what the next episode's going to be about. So, like I said, I'm really trying to use Twitter more, so check me out there, again, at SegaLordX. I am SegaLordX. I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.